One. Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast and YouTube video with me, Johnny Pardo. So today I've got a guest appearance. Jenn, my friend Jenn is joining us today. So thank you, Jenn, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's brilliant to talk to you across the seas and have you giving some contribution to our listeners. To them, we're going to get such value. So thank you so much. So Jenn is a mum. She's been sober for almost 3 years. Congratulations, Jenn. That's an amazing achievement in terms of not going for that long. That must have been the challenge. She's lost 70 pounds. She's divorced, but she works hard on mindset and loves inspiring others to help them get out of being stuck and show them that anything is possible in life. So that's a really, really good insight from Jenn. But Jenn, would you like to say a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your story, where you've come from and where you are now?
Okay. So like you said, my name is Jenn, and right now I am a single stay-at-home mom. I live here in Colorado, and I have been sober for almost 3 years. And so it's just been, it's been quite the journey for sure. My story, I would say, starts back a little longer than 3 years ago, maybe about like 5 or 6 years ago. I was, felt really stuck in life. I was a waitress. I was a new mom. I was depressed. I was overweight, and I would, kind of just like mask my pain and in alcohol. I would drink every single night. And I lived on autopilot pretty much. So I would wake up in the morning hungover. I would go to work. I would come home from work. I would do the mom thing, and then I would start drinking. I'd pass out and do the same thing every single day. And it sucked. I didn't feel like I was growing. I didn't feel like I was, I just felt really stuck in life. My marriage was just not good, and I felt very alone, and it was hard. And so that's kind of where I was 5, 6 years ago. And it wasn't until I really hit a threshold where I pretty much said, I don't know what I need to do, but what I'm doing is not working. Something has to change, because I just wanted to feel happy, and I didn't feel happy at the time. And that's all I really wanted to do, was feel happy. And I hit my threshold and finally decided things needed to change. And there was actually one day in particular where he came into the diner that I worked at, and he basically offered me an opportunity to talk to him. He said, Jenn, he used to always say to me, Jenn, when you're ready to change your life, come talk to me. And for 7 years, I turned him down with a smile on my face, even though I was so stuck and hurting inside. I think that I just didn't want to admit that I needed help or admit that I had a problem or anything like that. So he would always say to me, Jenn, when you're ready to change your life, come talk to me. And I was always like, no, I'm good. And then one morning he came in, and I think he could see, my face. And it was the day that I was ready. And so he's like, are you ready to talk? And I basically threw my hands up in the air and I said, whatever you have to say, just tell me, because I need help and I don't know what I'm doing. So let's talk. And it was, I think it was the one day that, looking back, was the first time I actually said yes to myself and was open to receiving help. And so that was one day that I think changed my life. And that day pretty much started this journey that I've been on for the last 5.5 years. That's how it started.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. So kind of obviously this man was sounded like quite persistent and caring in a way. So that's obviously really good that you did respond to that help. So you mentioned about being on autopilot mode a little bit, and perhaps habits or doing things, routines that didn't actually serve you. Were there things, was it a case that you were conscious things weren't helping you, or were you not conscious of some things that weren't serving you?
I mean, at that time, I knew that the things I was doing wasn't necessarily serving me, but at the same time, it was almost like I mean, I cared, but it was like I didn't care, because I cared more about escaping than I cared about changing anything. So like I would, at nighttime when I would start drinking, like I knew it wasn't good. I knew I shouldn't be doing it, but at the time, like I didn't really care, because it made me happier. I thought it made me happier to escape the pain in that way, the pain that I was feeling inside, as opposed to dealing with it. Dealing with it was just too much, too hard. I would have had to take a hard look at myself, and I just wasn't ready for that. So I knew what I was doing wasn't necessarily serving me. It wasn't serving my marriage. It wasn't serving my son. But I had such low self-worth that the drinking is what made me feel better, and I didn't care. So I would do it.
And yeah, I mean, for myself, I've definitely been there when I've kind of been through, we all got different situations, but kind of like the drinking when I've had sort of like nights out going through rough times, and then just quite frankly, binge drinking with friends, and just to kind of like get away problems, which kind of temporarily was felt on top of the wall, but then the next day or the end of the night was kind of a complete come down, and it's like twice as bad. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I guess I think what you're saying was the change seemed like it was too much of a big thing to do, whereas kind of some of the things you were doing, you felt like they weren't serving you, but they gave you a temporary good fix. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah, I mean, it was like I was depressed about the things I was doing. So, it's like you wake up in the morning feeling like crap, and you're regretting everything from the night before, and you're just so down on yourself, and you're saying all these negative things in your head, all these negative thoughts. And then you start going on with your day. And then by the time nighttime comes around again, it's like you just start drinking again, even though you're going to wake up in the morning feeling like crap. You just start doing it. And like that was the autopilot thing for me. It was just this toxic cycle that I was in. And so the day that man was at the diner and he was like offering me some help, the first time I said yes to myself, opening to listening to what somebody had, to say and had to offer me. Like, that's not the day that I got sober, but that was the day that I just decided to start doing something different. And the day that I started to have a little bit belief that there might be, that change is possible for me. And also too, but even before that day, like before I got that belief that like I could change things, it was almost like I had this belief that, this is just the way life is. This is just what people do. We're just miserable. We go to work, we escape from our problems, and like that's just it. And so once I like started having this belief that, things could change, and I didn't know what the changes were going to look like, all I did was like, I threw my hands up in the air and basically kind of said like yes to hope. Like, there's hope for me, because I see it from the guy that offered me help. He had been sober for 30 years. He was happy. He had time freedom. He had a lot of money. He traveled all the time. He inspired people. He had the life that I wanted, and I turned him down for 7 years before I was open to hearing anything that he had to say. I was, skeptical, but I also, you know, wasn't open to receiving anything. So that's basically what happened. And then once I opened up to him and started, what happened is that it first started because I said yes to him, and I started intentionally, consciously going and hanging out where he was hanging out and surrounding myself with his people and feeling just a little bit inspired by hanging out with people that were doing different things in life, because my people were drinking all the time and miserable and working 9 to 5s and partying on the weekends, and like those were all my people. So when I started intentionally going and hanging out with him and his people, I felt inspired even more in my belief, knowing that like, okay, it's possible, just keep hanging out with these people. And I think that's one of the first things, like the first steps towards change, is surrounding yourself with people that inspire you and that have what you want. Because what they say, it's like you are who you hang out with. The 5 people you hang out with, like that's who you are too. And so if you're hanging out with a bunch of drunks, you're going to be a drunk. If you're hanging out with a bunch of people who are miserable and complaining all the time, well, you're probably miserable and complaining all the time too. So I think that was really the first step, was just surrounding myself with different people.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about your environment. It's definitely key, and it's you can have different friends in different areas, but I found from my own personal experience and what I try to talk to listeners and clients is about making sure they've got that good network group or group of people that they can find who are going to like push them, whether it's a mentor or coach or whether it's a group of people you go to an event with and they can kind of inspire you. But it sounds like your belief shift was one of the things that really got you going, and the belief that you, as you said, change was possible, and that really helped you, because before you didn't believe it. And that belief, so it kind of shifted from putting your hands up. I guess you were in a place you wanted to reach out. When you were in a lot of, this is enough, right? I've had enough of this. I need to just change something. And often we kind of make the change usually when we're at a certain point, or just we get the inspiration to do so. But it sounds like you were at a point where it was just, I need to make change right now. So yeah, thank goodness you did. And coming up almost 3 years sober as well. That's incredible. And what did you say that man was? 30 years sober, or was it?
He was, at the time, I mean, this was about 5 or 6 years ago. So right now, I think he's about 30, 31 years sober. I could be off a couple of years. He's one of my mentors and my really amazing friends. I love him dearly, and I should know the exact year, but I don't. But it's like 30 years. Like, it's been a long time.
Yeah. Okay. No, that is great. And yeah, very inspired by, the amount you've done. So that's great. And the changes you've seen physically and mentally, I guess, in your life sound really, really positive. So just looking at self-talk, you kind of covered a couple of things I was going to talk to you about, but your self-talk when you're in a place of this place of kind of when you believe change couldn't be possible as opposed to where you are now, what's your self-talk like to yourself when you believe change wasn't possible? I mean, were you on your back constantly? Were you just like slating yourself for things?
Yeah, when I didn't have any belief, when I was feeling depressed all the time, Like, I know that the thoughts that were going on in my head was like, why am I not good enough? Like, why? It was a lot of like questions, like myself, like self-worth questions. Why am I not good enough? Why doesn't anybody, like me? Why, you know, I mean, honestly, the questions I used to ask myself, I think that was like the main one was like, why am I not good enough? I used to always feel that way with my husband. Why am I not good enough? I used to always feel that way at work when my boss would, be a dick. Why am I not good enough? I'm trying so hard here. Like, why am I not good enough? Like, and it was a lot of why am I not good enough?
And it sounds like some of those questions you're asking yourself kind of led to bad responses. And obviously, as a couple of people we both follow, talk about, your questions determine your answer, and therefore that impacts on how you're feeling about yourself. So I guess that those kind of questions were leading you to a lack of self-worth at the time and not feeling so good. But compared to looking where you are now, do you find yourself asking yourself better questions, and do you find yourself speaking to yourself in a much better way now?
I definitely speak to myself much better now. I don't usually ask myself negative questions. And if a negative question goes through my mind or pops up in my head, I definitely am more conscious of what's going on up here. So if a negative thought comes into my mind, like, I'm pretty good at flipping the switch pretty quickly. And
Awareness. Yeah.
Awareness for sure. And it doesn't really happen that often. Like I can't really remember a recent time where I've, spent more than, I don't know, not even maybe 10, 15 minutes feeling down on myself, because I'm pretty conscious now about saying, like, I don't have that feeling of like I'm not good enough anymore, because I do believe now that I am good enough, and I have a lot more understanding about other people and their perspectives, I just don't let, stuff like that I don't let other people get me down like they used to. And so the thoughts that go, I mean, my new primary question, the last one that I wrote is, how can I shine light onto myself and others even more than I already do now? So, like, to me, that means, and I know it's kind of long, and how can I shine light onto myself and others even more than I already do now? To me, that means I am good enough. How can I be even better? And how can I help more people? That's pretty much my new primary question. And then my other new primary question that I just recently came up with that I've been thinking a lot about too, so I'll just throw it in there. It's, does this feel like love? So
Two great primary questions there. I love it. And I'm glad you brought up primary questions as well, because consciously putting questions for us to ask ourselves gets our brain thinking in a different way as well, rather than, like you said, why am I not good enough? Or another one people ask is, what's wrong with me? Or what have I done wrong? Or what's going to go wrong today? And things like that. Because if we wake, and it's very common with kind of like, if we're not careful and conscious of the information we're taking in and our habits, like you mentioned about autopilot mode, for us to ask ourselves like bad questions. So the fact you've got those primary questions are fantastic. Like the one you mentioned about, how can I shine light more, in the emphasis that you already do, but how you do it even more. So I really, really like that one. My one was, how can I get from my head to my heart even more, as a kind of my own one, because like I sometimes get caught up in my own sort of like mind, and I realized that. So I was getting more into kind of the heart and kind of giving to people coming from that place. So I love what you shared as well. And if anyone's kind of not familiar with a primary question, it's basically the main question you're asking yourself on a consistent basis that we're not even consciously aware of that we're asking sometimes. So kind of developing good questions to yourself at the start of the day can be a really good one, even when you're asking out. There's one exercise where, and I know, Jen, you're a big fan of like putting stuff about and having, you know, positive affirmations and quotes and stuff like that, which is really good to get your brain to look out for it. But I read also that having questions in front of you is quite an effective way as well. And then just saying, okay, what am I going to answer that? So I'd advise anyone to sort of think of a couple of good questions they can ask. Like Jen's examples were brilliant, that you can start asking yourself early on. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing those questions. And that's been really useful from your point of view, how that shifted your self-talk as well. So that's useful. So you mentioned about, I just wanted to kind of touch on some of the things that got you into a better place. You've obviously already told us a little bit about it. So there was finding this man and surrounding yourself in that environment whereby people were uplifting, they were inspirational. You weren't perhaps surrounding yourself with negative people who perhaps had bad habits that didn't serve you. You saw some good things. Were there perhaps maybe like 2 or 3 good habits that you developed from these people that kind of helped rise you up and get that kind of positive mindset even more and more?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I was, they inspired me to like start dreaming and to dream bigger and that belief. But some of the habits that I developed in the very beginning were, one thing was, and specifically they were like, you need to clean up your social media. And so I was like, okay. And so they basically told me, every morning post an inspirational quote.
Ooh.
And so I was like, okay. So I made the decision pretty early on that every morning when I got up, I was going to post an inspirational quote on my social media. And it's funny because I look at my memories now from like 5 years ago, and those inspirational quotes are all in my memories. And so it's just kind of funny to see those. But looking back, I can see what that was doing was I would wake up in the morning and I would be hungover. And instead of laying in bed feeling depressed and feeling like a shitty mom and feeling, regretting things, I would immediately get on my phone and start looking through inspirational quotes to pick one out for my social media.
I love this.
And what happened was, I didn't know at the time, but now looking back, I can see that, I'd wake up in the morning and I was changing my focus from all the shit in my life to looking at inspirational quotes. And like, I think that's one thing that kind of started training my brain to, think more positive, look for the good. And it's funny because the quotes, you're picking out a quote. And when you're doing it, when you're first starting change, like you don't necessarily believe what you're reading, and you don't believe the quotes totally, but they sound good. And you're like, okay, and you post them. And now looking back on these quotes, I can see like, for instance, you are who you hang out with. Like even that one, the 5 people you surround yourself with. 5 years ago, when I was posting those quotes, like I didn't necessarily know how much of an impact like it really is. But I was posting the quote 5 years ago because it made me feel excited. but I didn't know that it was so impactful, really. So anyways, it was a lot of like that's how it started, was just changing my focus from shit to more positive thinking just right in the morning. That led to a gratitude journal shortly after. So I would get up in the morning, I would post my inspiration, I would look through all the inspirational quotes, I would post one on my social media, and then I would pick up a gratitude journal and I would write 10 things that I was grateful for. And I would write down 3 people that I wanted to send love to. And at the time, my son was 3 years old. And so I made it kind of fun. And so I would also ask him, what are you grateful for? And so he would say silly things like Paw Patrol and dinosaurs, that kind of
Oh,
stuff. But it was just fun. And so, it really just got our minds like shifting from the shit to the good. And I think that's what really started, my training my mind is kind of, I guess, the word I'm using right now, but like training my mind in that way. And so even now I'm very conscious about, my life isn't perfect. There's, but I don't focus on everything that's missing. And I don't focus on what I'm lacking. Like my focus is on, what's going right and the people that I love and, all of that. So like that's the beginning, was just changing my focus. And then I would say like the second thing that group of people really inspired me to do, that was like a major help in my life, was they pushed me to step out of my comfort zone. And kind of over and over and over again. And for me, stepping out of my comfort zone was not only posting on social media every day, but it started with live Facebook videos, because when they first started was about 4 years ago, when Facebook started letting us do live videos. And I remember the first time I did it, I was terrified. I sat in front of the button for like 2 hours and I didn't want to push the button, but one of my mentors was like, Jenn, just push the button, just do it. And I was like, no. And she was like, just do it. And so I did it. I did a live video and I ended up doing a live makeup tutorial, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was terrified. But after the video, it wasn't the best video, but afterwards I was so proud of myself, because I was like, yeah, I did it. Like I did a live video, like, yay. I was so excited. And I kind of kept doing those. And every time I would do one, I was terrified. And then I would do it and I would feel this high afterwards. And looking back, I can see that what that was doing, it was really helping me build up my confidence and my belief in myself. And just, because, when you do things that you're scared to do, or you don't believe you can do, and then you do them and you're, proud of yourself, like celebrate it. Like I'd celebrate every single one. And I think that's another thing that like it helped me build up my confidence and my belief in myself. And it was just slowly over time. I was just doing that slowly over time. And I think, between surrounding myself with more positive people and building up, changing my mindset and my focus and pushing myself to step out of my comfort zone, I think those are big factors in what led me to finally be strong enough to make the decision to get sober and say, I'm doing it this time. I can do it. I'm worth it. I'm so done with the alcohol. I mean, if that's what we're talking about here, like that's what led me up to that. And I think it was those things that led me to be able to make that decision with confidence and to stick with it and just be like, I'm just done with it. Like this is not the life that I want. The alcohol, it can't be a part of it, and it's no longer serving me. So it needs to go.
Love it. Love what you've said there. So many golden nuggets in terms of the inspirational quotes and the gratitude journal. Love what you're saying about that. And then also just talking about coming out of your comfort zone as well and taking a step, because I mean, for me personally, and I guess from what you're saying, you feel similar, is that when you do something that scares you even a little bit, you just get that feeling of, I've had the courage to do that. And I always emphasize to people that, you know, everyone has fear. It's just about how you deal with it, even if you have to break it down into smaller things sometimes. And that can really, really build up, like going from, sometimes we think fear and doing something out of comfort zones, like being scared of public speaking, they're talking in front of 1,000 people. You know, that's just not doable, but it might be just making a little Facebook Live. Obviously not that you necessarily have to be going towards 1,000 people, but just doing those little things that scare you. I love that, because it builds that trust in yourself and that belief that you are capable. And also love what you touched on about celebration. So often missed by human beings. But when we do something wrong, it's so easy to criticize ourselves, which is the wrong way around. So love what you're saying, celebration, because it's also Joseph McClendon, who I follow quite a lot in some of his groups from some of Tony's events, as we were talking about. He's always on about praising yourself speeds up and reinforces you to do something again. So I'm so glad you were celebrating as well. So as daft as it sounds to say, well done, Jen, or well done, Johnny, it's something that is silly not to do in a way. So so I'm so glad you've shared those. So this sounds like quite a few bits, and I've been writing down, right, I need to post more inspirational quotes. I'm going to post some gratitude. I do gratitude, but I'm picking stuff out here. So thank you for sharing. The kind of the last thing I wanted to touch on, and it's been such a valuable conversation, is your non-negotiables now. What would you say, and some of these may have been answered previously, but what would you say were like maybe the couple of few things you feel like are non-negotiables on a regular basis for you to keep you in a good place?
Non-negotiables to keep me in a good place. Well, I am really conscious about not, I'm conscious about who I hang out with and the information that I take in. I'm conscious about when I hear people talking or I hear things, not looking at who that's coming from, and not taking things personally. I don't like to be around people that complain all the time and that are, stuck in their victim story. I'm pretty conscious about setting boundaries, but also like I also am very conscious about loving and not judging people for where they're at, but just trying to have more being understanding, but also setting my boundaries so it doesn't get me down. Because like I know that like my mindset and what I'm focused and where I'm going, like that's the most important thing to me. So I would say not like non-negotiables. I mean, I don't know if I have a ton of non-negotiables. Like I don't want to put myself in situations that like I just don't want to be in. I don't hang out with people that I don't want to hang out with. When my ex-husband and I, have to see each other when we're doing things with my son, like the things that he says, like I just don't take it personally anymore. And I don't know.
Brilliant.
I don't know if any of that made sense.
No, absolutely. It's some very clear guidelines, thanks, Jens, around the information we're taking in, around the people we're hanging out with, and just being conscious in general of what you're doing. So I think that's really, really important. And like you touched on really early in the conversation about you are on this autopilot mode of not even, perhaps less conscious than you are now, and realizing, being able to identify when things aren't serving you now. So that's definitely some fantastic words we can leave people with. So thank you for that. Well, Jenn, really appreciated your time today and your value in terms of what you've given us in terms of the mindset and some little things to get us into that good place, especially if sharing very vulnerably your story when you weren't in such a good place to where you are now. And I know you go out in the world and you share that regularly. So thank you so much for sharing that. And obviously, if you're listening, you can obviously listen and hear from what Jenn said today, listen to the episodes, but make sure you're putting in good information into your head on a regular basis, because if you're not, you're not going to feel as good and not have that mindset. So that's what I'd kind of like to leave today with. Now, Jenn, if anyone wants to follow you, where's the best place?
Well, I do most of all of my stuff on Facebook. I'm on other platforms too, but like Facebook is where you'll find me hanging out at the most. And so my name on Facebook is Jenn with 2 N's, and then Lockhart, Lockhart.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, Jenn. Thank you for being with us today. So we'll wrap it up there, and I'll leave that for people to have a look at. So thank you so much for sharing us and for being so inspirational to us all. So thank you for listening as well, everyone, and I will catch you in the next episode.